Okay, hello everyone. Today's class topic is on the 12th house, and the title is Surrender, Faith, and Love Without End. So the 12th house is the polarity to the 6th house. We'll introduce this by reviewing what the 6th house is. The 6th house is where we are putting forth effort. It's where we are constantly addressing and fine-tuning and refining the multiple areas of our life that are constantly in need of maintenance. Anything in the 6 requires maintenance. Without our maintenance, without our willingness to self-improve and develop, things fall apart. So in the 6, we develop a very useful and good use of control. So then what's the 12th house about if it's the opposite? Is it about doing nothing? Is it about just letting go of the physical world entirely and ignoring the reality of your teeth needing to be brushed or bills needing to be paid and just dissolving completely into a total sense of unity? The 12th house is about surrender. And it's not about what we often think of as surrender. Because when we often associate surrender with whatever we think we need to surrender, or wherever we're in that relationship to letting go, we often associate it as something that is requiring some loss of sovereignty, some loss of agency, some loss of power. Like falling into a puddle, becoming a puddle and being all walked on and, surrendering everything to God. But what we miss in the 12th house is that we often associate all kinds of ideas and beliefs about surrender, about letting go. And we can replace the word surrender here with being peaceful, loving, serving. And all of the ideas that we associate with it are unconsciously ways in which we keep ourselves from the truth of it. The truth of peace, the truth of love, the truth of being loving, the truth of true service, the truth of surrender, by its very nature, can't be limited by a condition that we've placed upon it in our minds. And so surrender looking a certain way. The true polarity to the 6th house isn't just this like fall out of alignment to become a puddle. This polarity to the 6th house is where in the 6 we're constantly using discernment and discrimination. In the 12th house, we're learning to completely dissolve all discernment and discrimination. And this can be very confusing if we don't understand why, what it's really about. The disillusionment of our sense of control, of our sense of meaning, is really what it means to dissolve our discrimination and our discernment. The discrimination here is where we see things as two. We look at the world and we see past and future. We see self and other. We see failure and success. We see people that I love, people that I don't love. People worthy of my attention, people not worthy of my attention. We see big problems and we see small problems. We have good days and we have bad days. And the dissolving of discrimination here is to orient ourselves to what's true, what's fundamentally true. We're constantly giving causality to the lives that we live. This causality says, I ate something and so I feel nauseous. Or I did this thing and now I feel guilty. Or it's rainy right? And therefore I'm getting wet. We have all these associations. Of course, in the mind of a child or a baby, there aren't these associations. Anything can be so. But we live in this way in life where we're constantly applying and directing our associations towards everything that we think is real. And from a sixth house perspective, of course, like if you're not going to wear a jacket, you're going to get cold, you're going to get wet. If you're going to eat a lot of sugar, you're going to feel really crappy. But that's only one side of the polarity. That's just the sixth house. In the 12th house, the dissolving of discrimination is pointing us to a fundamental truth that has no cause. Wet and dry have a cause. Hot and cold have a cause. And predominantly our consciousness is sort of like, it's linked, it's bound, it's so intensely defined by these factors of causality. And therefore, in any particular day, if we are struggling with something, if we're having a problem with something, we'll tend to look towards our solutions. What can I do to fix this? And the seeming rationality of that, of where we think we can be in control of things, in our mind, some instances feel more reasonable than others, but it's really all the same. From a 12th house perspective, it's all the same. There's not one problem that's more of a problem than any other problem. They're all perceptions of the mind, where we assume in this perception of causality that I can do something to cause something. And something can happen to cause something happen, to cause me to be a certain way. That when we do that, we bring our attention to a vibration that requires constant separation, meaning it's like we're going to necessarily be always working, always needing to do, always needing to adjust, always needing to seek resolutions. And the 12th house fundamentally points to the reality that is already resolved because there's no problems in it. It points to what's inherently true. In the process of seeking resolution, in living in a construct of causality, we're perpetuating the duality of opposites, right? There are problems, and so we have to fix it. There are wrongs, we have to make it right. We feel, nauseous because we ate something, or we have a stomach ache. Suddenly we amend that by doing, now all this feels incredibly reasonable to all of us. From a very earth sign perspective, this is reasonable. It's how we're all living. But what's the 12th house really about? I like to really point us to that understanding that you can't have two opposite realities coexisting at the same time. We often think that we can, and we live in the illusion that we can, but I think in that very same way, we struggle with true peace. We struggle with a true serenity, with finding true serenity, true joy. It's because on some level, we're invested in this idea, in this conviction that control is necessary in some areas of life in order to fix the things that are wrong. And it feels completely reasonable. And I'm not saying that this is about falling into a puddle and just letting go of everything completely. I'm just I'm setting the stage up to where I want to go with this. So I'll give us an example. First, anything in the 12th house is where we're dissolving our discrimination. We're learning the sameness of everything, the sameness. We're learning to orient to what doesn't change, to what's eternal, to our source of love, of unity, of oneness. That doesn't require anything to be so. And so to give you an example, let's say we have Leo in the 12th house. And so what's dissolving in Leo, right? All ideas of separation around your own self-actualization. At some moments, are more important than others. Whether people see you or not makes a difference. How you look, how much you're being recognized, fame versus anonymity. These notions of discrimination, those are being dissolved. How good of a job you did on something, how well you dressed, whether people, really get you for what you are, or whether you need to try harder to be seen. It's like the truth of Leo. That's what's being found there. Like the truth of Leo, the truth of what you are as a unique aspect of creation. It's the truth of Leo. It's just what is. And it's not a thing you can make so. And so what's confusing about it then is identity is like, well, what do I do with that? What do I do with that? Think about Gemini in the 12th house. You know what you need to know, and there's a question, and then you'll think, oh, let me go to, research or ask a lot of questions. And Gemini in the 12th can have this issue with just being completely absorbed in trying to, figure things out and logically piece things together. And it's trying to find some sort of mental, intellectual cohesion. But it's the truth of Gemini. It's a fundamental truth of Gemini. Everything actually already makes logical sense. And you know what you need to know, and that your mind is not separate from all other minds. Leo in the 12th, your beauty is not separate from the beauty of life. Your being as creation is not separate from creator. But what do you do with that truth? Right? So Gemini, so then what are you going to say? What are you going to learn? What are you going to do? Right? So this is where there's this tendency in the 12th house to try to find something to hold on to. And when I speak about dissolving discrimination, it's a way of understanding, it's a way of learning that everything is the same. The mind giving meaning to things, less important, more valuable, less valuable, where God is, and where meaning can be found in my life, where couldn't. And then it puts us in a constant stress of needing to figure out. And existentially underneath that is a deep fear of being lost, a deep fear of being separate, a deep fear of being far from the source. Now, we know with Pisces 12th house stuff, of course, there's the issue of having bad boundaries and being indiscriminate. It's like, sure, I'll give to anyone. And this is where I want to really clarify and differentiate between the becoming a puddle ideas of surrender versus surrendering into what's true. Becoming a puddle is not surrender. Lacking boundaries and just, being indiscriminate in that way is actually existing on top of a foundation of mistakenly seeing one's unique self as a hindrance, as an obstacle to oneness. And so then there's the unwillingness to actually allow the oneness to use the self. It's like you're deciding to use the self. All right, I'm electing what to do with my mind, what to do with my gifts, and that election comes from my own choice to think according to my own ideas where I want to create meaning. And so to truly not know, there's a teaching in A Course in Miracles. It's a section called Rules for Decision. And the teaching says something like, decide every day how you want to feel: happy, content, peaceful, joyful, unity, supported, whole. These are all word vibrations that reflect absolute qualities of reality. Right? Like joy and sadness aren't polarities. Content, joy, fulfill, well, that's the essential nature of reality. And sadness and unfulfillment and discontent are processes that we're working out on our own healing. They're states of mind, but they're not opposites to joy, contentment, freedom, wellness, safety. That's inherent to what we are as we are created. It's everything in life. It's important to understand that. In the same way that dark isn't the opposite of light. One's original, one's derivative. And so we make that choice. Today, I will abide in joy. I will experience joy and fulfillment, happiness. And then the instructions are make no decision on your own. Because this is where we say to find joy, to find fulfillment, to find God, essentially, to find meaning in life, I have to do these things. I have to be these things. I have to exercise all this discrimination. This choice is important. And we have that teaching, seek the kingdom of heaven first, and all else shall be given to you. We want to seek everything else first because we know that everything else will make us happy. And the temptation, the feeling of, I need to resolve this morning, before meditation, I made that cardinal mistake of opening up my phone. And all this stuff happening in my email world, getting charged for something, a few $100s, and by accident didn't cancel a subscription, and some emails from people, and my mind was irritated. I actually wanted to skip my morning practices. But the wisdom in me knew that that was really important. So I went out to a spot where there's some trees, a little forested area, and I sat and did my practice. And my experience was sitting with that sense of, at first, this sense of, I need to resolve these things. I need to really work it out. And it's like wanting to move forward according to my own thinking, wanting to move forward according to that initial sense of there's something wrong. I need to fix it as soon as possible. Whenever we perceive something as wrong, it matches within ourselves this sense of immediacy, because who wants to live with something wrong? So as long as our minds are consumed with there being something off in our lives, there isn't rest until we found that solution. But what I found myself exploring this morning was giving everything to the source, right? Letting myself, almost like catching the tail of the tiger, just meeting it, connecting it. Like, okay, here is where I'm experiencing the sense of disrest. And in that sense, saying, I thus don't know how to see this accurately. It must be that I am not looking at the truth, because the truth is not disrest. This is what we learn in the 12th house. The truth is not distress. The truth is not suffering. The truth is not disunity. The truth is not problem. But to accept that means being with that discomfort of not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go. And whatever you put on the 12th house is where we can have that experience. Where do I find myself? Where do I find direction? And the answer is you don't. And this is what I mean with this practice of non-discrimination. Everything that arises, every problem, every challenge, every struggle, every interaction, we aren't the ones that give it meaning. We aren't the ones that decide what to do about it. Now, of course, there's that 6th house dimension, which is real. It exists. We're working with it. We don't want to become too materialistic in the 6th house and forget the deeper water, the water signs are sort of like the behind the scenes purpose for this life. It's what's really going on. So we don't want to get lost in just this false idea of control, which is very temporary, very relative. It's very much a relative experience, conditional experience of where we need to apply effort and control. But in the 6th house, it's like, not because there's something wrong. It's more of an understanding of this is where it is my work to show up and cultivate humility, cultivate relationship to love. So in the 6th house, we're not going to be able, in the 12th house, we're not going to be able to do that. What happens when we try to do that is we'll come from our own limiting thinking, saying, okay, here, let me put the cards in this order, stack them up in here and build this idea of a house. But it's all just made of cards. The winds can blow and can totally just fall down. And this can feel disillusioning time and time and time again. The ways in which we deal with our sense of not knowing, our sense of losses, our sense of struggle. All of these efforts often just take us back into this place time and time and time again. where we'll find ourselves either feeling abandoned or betrayed or lost or hopeless or futility. Like, what's the point in any way? Right? And in that sense, we'll just sort of check out. We'll numb ourselves. Or we'll take it as a sign to become so devotional. I want peace, and this isn't working. Libra in the 12th house. I'm in this relationship, and I keep on listening and giving and sharing, and they still keep on hurting me. What do I do? Right? And the answer is the truth of love doesn't require you being someone. The truth of love is oneness. It's indiscriminate. And wherever you're holding, there's a sense of needing to do something, to fix something, to heal something, is where you're perpetuating your own dis-ease. One of the deeper teachings within the 12th house is letting everything be exactly as it is, a neutrality. That neutrality teaches us to not judge and to not discriminate one thing differently than how we might discriminate another thing. And that neutrality basically allows us to look upon the world, which is full of suffering, right? People are suffering. There's a lot of pain in the world. Even our own selves, to look upon our own selves and to not see suffering as suffering, to not see our problems as something wrong. Because the moment we do that, we're forgetting God. This is why you can't have two opposite realities coexisting at the same time. Does love see that there's a problem? No. Like, the very nature of love is that it doesn't recognize problems. It's like this perspective, this knowing that is always forgiving. It's always a good thing because it's going to reveal the truth of what is in any particular instance. Absolute reality, God, love, truth doesn't know not that. And that's why I speak about these qualities of peace, joy, fulfillment, contentment as original to life. Now, this can go into some trippy places. I started off this talk speaking about these ideas where we think of causality. Now, of course, on some level, on a more earth level, it exists, earth signs. You eat, you'll feel a certain way. But within absolute reality, it's not true, right? If your path of surrender, if your path to know God is taking you into the places where you've held a false sense of illusory control because of fear, it's like, if I don't control this, I'll become a puddle. I'll get walked on. I'll be left behind. If our path of surrender is taking us into those very places, there is a great opportunity there to discover and realize something that is far beyond this world, far beyond this world. We think we need food to eat. We think we need to wear clothing to not be cold. Like, it would be absolutely naive if we just tried to believe this was so without actually knowing it. But this is the idea of a miracle. Like, where does a miracle come from? Where do the seeming laws or rules of reality sometimes, in some cases, get bent? But, what are the conditions that make that happen? Why is it some people can experience and do certain things or see certain things, or some people can communicate and have a conversation? It doesn't matter how many miles away you are. There are some people that can look at your body and know exactly what's going on. It doesn't matter if they're actually physically in front of you. There are some people that can heal bodies just by directing their attention and their thought. Like, where does that come from? I had this experience once where I was in Israel. This was in 2003. There's a man that was limping. I met him on the street in the city of Sfat. He was limping. He was, picking up a boulder like a week ago, and he pulled his back out, and his back was really out. He was in a lot of pain. He invited me over his house for a Rosh Hashanah lunch. And, you know, this was before I really got into a lot of the spiritual things that I've explored. But I did some Tai Chi in college, you know, the year before, and I was aware of the energy of Chi, the idea of it. And so I just had this feeling like there was something in my hands. I didn't create it. I didn't intend it. I just felt it. And so I asked him if I could do a healing. So he lied down. I just put my hands on his back. No techniques or Virgo. I didn't even feel like I was doing something. It felt like my hands were being used. And I asked him how he felt, and he was healed. He was like, "Oh, just a little bit." And I'm like, "You're right. You know, I felt that there was just like a little more to go." Another minute of putting my hands on him, he was completely healed. He was jumping up and down. I went to synagogue with him later that day. He was telling everyone. He was completely blown away. I was really humbled. That was a total surprise. I had no way to explain that. I didn't do anything. It literally just felt like all I had to do was be there. And I remember walking through the streets of that city, the stone streets, and thinking, what is this? What's this all about? So later that year, I was attending this festival by the Mediterranean Sea. And on the way there, I got really sick. I was just completely, my nodes were inflamed. I had a headache. I was really tired. I could hardly stand. But I got there because I was traveling and I had nowhere to go. So I just wanted to get there to at least have a place to be. Some people brought me to the front of the ticket line because they saw that I was really sick. And they brought me directly to the Reiki tent where there's a Reiki course going on. So I just sat there. I'm just feeling, you know, that feeling where you're aching all over, your head really hurts, completely miserable. And in the break, this man walks over to me and I lie down and he just puts his hands under my head for a moment and I feel completely better just in a moment. Everything was just completely healed. You know, the normal way of thinking is if you pulled your back out, you do therapy. Right? You in the world of causality, there are physical steps and things to take to undo the physical things that have been created. Physically, there's congestion, there's inflammation in my body, physical rest, drinking warm tea. All these things are very intuitive and natural things to do to a body. But then there's just the truth, which has nothing to do with that. Like that truth can come in anywhere, anytime, in any place, in any context, in any way. And that truth says the fundamental reality is wholeness. Yeah, Linda, what's your question? Isn't all Pisces Neptune contains in all the houses? The truth of love infuses. Let me actually open up the text. The 12th house itself, it infuses all the houses, not just the 12th. The 12th house itself is therefore neutral, non-discriminative, and contained in everything, including the opposite house. You cannot have not God. Therefore, the truth infuses the whole chart. Yeah, beautiful. I love that. If there's no such thing as not God, the 12th house is everything. Absolutely. And that's where it's in a way, everything else in the chart, really, if you think about it, is what's it for? Right? This is why the water signs are sort of the essence, because we have to understand there's a reason for the body. There's a reason for time. There's a reason for eating. There's a reason for all the limitations and constructs and the experience of relationship and procreation. Like there's a reason for all of it, but the reason it's not itself. Like time's reason is not itself. Procreation's reason is not itself. The body's reason it's not itself. Everything in this world serves a template for our own evolutionary journey. And this is the essential way of understanding the Pluto-Neptune dynamic, the 12th house and the 8th house in relationship to everything. From the 12th house point of view, everything is God. Nothing is separate from it. And so thus there's a reason why each one of us on our own journey are learning to apply our attention in the areas that we are needing to. If you have Saturn in the 2nd house, it would be absolutely irresponsible to say, you know, don't track your finances. Just trust God. It's not about that. But what's the point of Saturn? What's the point of the 10th house? It's where we're learning responsibility. It's where we're cultivating a sense of agency and mastery over our life so that we can learn how to use time for our own spiritual development and growth. And so everything physical is temporary. Everything physical is a thing to be used. That's why in the 6th house, in my talk, I emphasize the spiritual quality of karma yoga. The work that we do is purifying our mind. It heals our minds. We're learning how to orient towards God and love, unconditionality through the work that we do. That's why we become very detail oriented in the 6th house, to bring care and attention to everything, all as a way of letting go of the self, all as a way of letting go of our own separation constructs. So everything can be understood correctly in that way. Otherwise, there's a materialism. Everything becomes its own purpose. And that's the point. We have to be able to discern consciously, where are we on our journey? What is relevant right now for our own growth? And it's like we always are exactly where we are. And so as we orient our attention to what is fundamentally true, there's a movement that comes from beyond our own making that calls us deeper and deeper and deeper beyond the world. It calls us to attend and concentrate and trust and communicate with what is not of this physical world. Deeper and deeper and deeper, which means there's a way on our own path, on our own life journey, where we're all being guided to practice non-discrimination, non-discernment. And the truth of that, imagine once we really surrender, right? When you really come into this place of knowing your oneness with God and that there's a deeper solution to all the perceived problems, and we explore that deeper, it's like, let me go into the source. Let me go to the source of all things to guide all of this. The source of all things knows all the parts, can orchestrate all the elements, can use your body, can use your mind, can use your relationships, can use your kitchen, can use your hands. And the forms and the vehicles, the constructs that we use are just the ways in which, according to our own conditioning, we are available to that which is unconditioned. The reason for this world, the reason for this life is to learn how to use it in our own awakening and thus ultimately the undoing of it. Because everything is temporary. That's the Pluto lesson. Everything comes and goes. But what's revealed in that coming and the going is the Neptune dimension. We direct our desires toward the 1,000 things of creation. But the Neptune dimension of reality is something that is just fundamentally true. And so when we're in the 12th house, this journey of surrender in non-discrimination is a practice of not seeing one moment as different than another moment. And this does not mean subduing or suppressing emotions, lacking in healthy discrimination and discernment when it's useful and relevant. So let me give you another example. You wake up in the morning, you feel horrible. You wake up in the morning, you feel great. From the 12th house point of view, no different. You sit down to meditate, and what's meditation? It's devoted time to orient to timelessness, to orient towards what is true. You sit down and you feel horrible. You sit down and you feel great. What's the difference? There is none. Because when we orient ourselves to God, to love, and we ask love to lead the way, not our own ideas, not our own conditioned state of emotions, not our own preferences, then we practice a stance, we practice a gesture of everywhere, always, no matter what, there is one truth, there is one reality. And as we practice that, the way we treat one another becomes indiscriminately the same. There's always a relative level, which only reflects what is relatively useful for us on our own soul journey for a time. I'll treat my daughter differently than I'll treat you. I'll treat my partner differently than I'll treat, you know, a child. I'll treat a client differently than I'll treat someone that I'm just hanging out with. But these are all conditional and relative situations that are useful for a time or for a lifetime. But they're not defining of what's actually true. So everything needs to be used relatively according to what's relevant at the time. And this is where the 12th house gets so crazy for us, because we're not comfortable with being indiscriminate. We're not comfortable with seeing that everything's the same, fundamentally so. And so two pieces that I want to address in unraveling this a little more deeply is this. One, the fear within the 12th house is that underlying sense of lostness. We all want absolute meaning in life. We all want to feel that there is meaning, that there is something of ultimate value that we can trust, that is a fundamentally good thing. And to not feel that is scary, because it basically means if there is something to worry about, if there actually is something to worry about, that's a big deal, right? If there's ever a moment where there's actually something of substance worth fearing, that means there's somewhere that God is not. There's somewhere that God can't solve it. There's somewhere where the love perspective isn't valid, isn't useful. So everything becomes a practice in refining our orientation to God. That's where discernment comes in. So I hope I'm not being confusing for how I started this talk, being very absolutist around discernment and discrimination. There is a use for discernment, but we have to understand what is the right use of it. We are not using discernment in the way that we usually think of discernment. Discernment being more about, how much of this should I eat, or how much clothing should I wear, or, how much should I give to this person, or what's the right job for me to have, or how much should I charge? That is not relevant. Those details aren't important. Actually, God doesn't even see those things. Love doesn't even know what the heck that means, really. The discernment here is discerning between where we are directing our attention, either towards the world or towards the absolute. When I say towards the world, it's towards the things of the world, the details, the 20,000 things where we can accidentally think we're going to find meaning and purpose there. Between that and the source of all things. And this is where on our own journey, and it depends on really what our own path of surrender is, what our own, some people's curriculum, so to speak, will take us really deep into like relationship work. Other people, it'll be more of a solitude journey away from people. For others, it might have something to do with healing and healing work. And just whatever you put on for others, it might have something to do with becoming famous and becoming an agent of something greater than yourself. Whatever it is, what's happening in the 12th house is you're learning to be used. You're learning to be a vessel. And thus you're learning to let God take over the story. And thus you're learning to let your perceptions be guided by a truth not of your own making. So let's give a couple examples. And as we explore this, we have to appreciate one of the things that keeps us from surrender is this sense of it's not safe. I don't want to lose control. Because what happens often in the 12th house is a sense of feeling very small. Life is walking on me. I'm being taken advantage of. I'm being good and kind, but things aren't working out. And that can really lead an individual to feel like I need to develop my immunity. Maurice talks about this beautifully a lot with the 12th house. There is often a stage of saying, okay, I need to put forth effort, not to become atrophied, right? Leo in the 12th house, I feel no one sees me, but Leo in the 12th, I actually have to I have to learn how to be more expressive. So maybe taking some acting classes might be great. There's nothing wrong with that, right? All things can be a part of the journey of training ourselves in that path of surrender. But then you become a famous actor and you get a lot of fame and you get a big ego and you think you're really important. And that's where the confusion sets in again. And then there's like, you get, published on the tabloids and you feel really embarrassed, and you do that whole thing where, poor me, I'm famous and everyone's thinking of me, no one really knows me. And you forget that that Leo energy is not yours. It doesn't serve its own purpose. It's God's. And your joy and your fulfillment is letting yourself be used in that way. When we allow ourselves to be the conduit of light, we experience that light. We are the recipients of it. We become intoxicated with infinite reality. And just to consider as well, in terms of intoxication, drugs, alcohol, sex, relation, all kinds of addictions that take us into a state of euphoria or joy or pleasure. These things can feel so tempting because without it, we're faced with that void, that emptiness. Where's meaning? Where's love? Where's joy? That's where the work is in the 12th house. It's like we have to actually practice orienting ourselves towards that. That's because the nature of God is indiscriminately everywhere and always available. And so our own practice is not about learning and the best tricks, or finding our humility and our faith to direct ourselves towards love anywhere and everywhere. It becomes stressful and perfect. When God goes, moon house, Saturn in the 12th house, your work does not have what boundaries to make, and struggling with paying the bills. When it gets to that point, it's a real calling to say, what is your will for me? And when we ask that, what would you have me do? We have to understand that this is never about becoming a puddle, because that metaphor of becoming a puddle is sort of the misunderstanding of surrender. So I'll speak about this, then I'll give a couple chart examples. That surrender to your will be done. You guide me, you use me. What's actually happening there is there's an active unification. The ego conscious redirecting itself towards its source. But we're staying in alignment. Say, okay, I'm a vessel, use me. And we keep that discrimination open in our choices. Right? We become more attuned to what it's like to be God guided, right? Christ inspired, love inspired. Anytime we're inspired by love, it's like that's what's moving us. Oftentimes surrender is misunderstood as help me, show me. I don't know what to do. I'm just going to go with the flow and trust whatever happens and move with it and say yes to everything. Never say no. This person offered me this opportunity, offered me this job. This person wants to be in a relationship. This person wants a free session with me. I'm just going to go with it. This is what's arising. There's no discrimination there. This is the important use of discrimination. We're actually not in love. It's just an idea, and we can convince ourselves of all kinds of stories to tell ourselves why we should be doing something. We can be in a relationship that's not working, right? And it's just like you're needing to sustain an illusion of like, oh, when I make cupcakes, he just melts and loves me, and such a good relationship. So yeah, just keep on making cupcakes and you'll feel that way. Like that's not unconditional love. So we'll have to sustain an illusion and just sort of delude ourselves in this false surrender. And we get to a point where we're giving and surrendering and letting go, then we feel completely depleted and completely exhausted. That's the puddle dynamic. And we come back to God. I thought I was surrendering, I let go. Very often, this is a part of the journey of the ego becoming so self-convinced of itself. It's like, I'm going to control everything and decide how it's going to work, right? Make it true, make it work, make it what I want it to be. And then we get back into that place of, that didn't quite work out. And so we go to the other end of just being completely indiscriminate in every regard. So the answer isn't either of those polarities. My experience of that sense of surrender and really saying your will be done is a deep humility where I first and foremost recognize I don't know what anything is for. I can know what's unfolding on my path. I can know where I'm being guided, where I'm being called, the things I'm called to study. I can know the path that has unfolded. But how does it want to be used? Okay, I studied astrology. How does that want to be used? Right? What's your will for me? What's your path for me? How do you want to use me? And when I start using that as a mind identification, there's no longer any God in it. It might look really good, but it's like a deck of cards. It'll fall apart at some point. So in learning how to be that instrument, we're learning how to orient to not our own thinking, but it's an active state of alignment and attunement to the source, which means we're bringing ourselves into a vibration of joy. That's why we're not becoming a puddle. We're rising ourselves to God. When we are a vessel, we become what we're giving. So we are love. We are one with Creator. We are one with Source. And so the path of that surrender is bringing ourselves into that place of attunement to love, becoming that, living that, vibing that. And this really offers the differentiation between two kinds of prayers. In the 12th house, there can be very much this expression of prayer. It's like, help me. I don't know what to do. Guide me. I'm lost. There's nothing going on there. Like it's like it's like trying to feed the number 5. It just doesn't make any sense. It's not going anywhere. Because God can't solve an illusion. We can't move into life from a perception, from a state of believing ourselves to be lost, asking to be found, because the fundamental premise is a mistake. So this doesn't mean suppressing our feelings of sorrow or suffering or pain or loss, acknowledging it, but getting quiet, doing the work to attune and reference something that is beyond all of that, and speaking to that with faith and with devotion. And what I find is bringing ourselves to love never negates or disempowers or pushes away or spiritually bypasses anything that we're feeling. That should be clear. Love just says it's always there. It's always true, which means everything's allowed and it's not going to take away from who you are. So bringing ourselves into a vibrational state of love actually brings us into relationship with what we're feeling, with what's arising. There's a song that I wrote. Oh, Dylan's not here right now, and I'm teaching a class right now, okay? He'll be back this weekend. I'll sing it. Oh, this moment I declare couldn't be better anywhere. Oh, these feelings I surrender. True love is here, I remember. So we remove our feelings from an object. We actually remove it from causality, which means we remove it from this idea that there's something we can do to fix it. So it just gets to be there. And it's almost like with all of our emotions, all of our feelings, as we give it space from the world, it's almost like love is sitting there with it, right? We feel that inside of ourselves. Love is sitting there with everything that we're feeling, and it's saying, don't try to control it. Don't try to hold it. Don't try to possess it. Stay here with me, and I will work everything out for you. And so what we do is we walk our path. We walk our chart. We take the next step. We do the next thing. Here's the next line. This is it. There is no other. Only this moment, just this wonder. Give your mind to the oneness. Return your mind to the oneness. The truth is that there's only this moment. And when we're in that world of control, of fear, we're constantly creating new moments. We're constantly creating pasts that cause something and futures that will resolve it. So there's a whole new framework, a whole new possibility of living. Now, one of the teachings of the 12th house is that miracles can happen. Miracles can be these temporary moments where there is a suspension of our status quo disbelief in God, in truth. A moment of forgetting all the things that we thought were real to be real. A moment of actually giving way to what is actually true. And anything could happen. Healings can happen, relationships, forgiveness can happen, sickness can be healed. There are no rules, and that's an important thing to understand. And oftentimes the blessing of experiencing a miracle, meaning something that seems to contradict the logical rules or constructs that fit into our box of time and space, maybe miracles can be explained logically too, right? You can look at everything and say, oh, there's logic to God. God has logic to it. But what's always going to happen is going to take us out of that control where we otherwise believe in time and process in order to find peace. The miracle of love is that peace is always available right now, and it's beyond whatever conditions we have in our mind that will argue with that. It's beyond our thinking. I think Michelle said, forgiveness is not what you think. You know, miracles are not what you think. God is not what you think. Okay, let's look at a couple chart examples. I'll address your question in a moment, Linda. It's a beautiful one, but I don't want to get too philosophical too much. Let me just look at a couple examples. Anyone want to offer themselves, and we can take a look. And while that's coming together, I actually want to share. I was gonna share some charts around the inconjunct between, you know, Pisces and Libra and Pisces and Leo, and then the semi-sextile. But yeah. Adriana, I see you put your thumbs up. Go for it. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Okay. So shall I share my chart, Ari? Shall I upload? Or?
Tell me your chart and I'll put it in there if you're okay with it. Unless Linda has
sure.
it.
Yes, sir. It's better. 17th of August, 1968. 11:50 a.m. 11:50 a.m. São Paulo, Brazil.
SAU, Paulo, or SAN?
SAO.
SAO, right. 11:50 a.m.
Yeah.
So is this your Neptune in the 12th?
Yeah.
Okay. Am I spelling I'm spelling your name wrong. My apologies. Let me just fix that for the heck of it.
Can I record this part?
This whole thing's being recorded.
Ah, okay. Great.
Okay. So, do you have a question? Is there a guidance for you to share something with us that I can then speak to?
Yes. I'll close the door. Yeah. My brother today, he has been 1 week with COVID virus. He's a physician, and today he entered the hospital, and it was very hard. And I did Reiki for 2 hours, and it was very strong, the strongest practice I've done. I felt a lot of healing and energy, and well, maybe about him, or shall I give him his chart in this case?
No.
Or about this healing? Maybe I should put out my healing and my ability more, or maybe.
Great. Okay, thank you. I hear where you're going with this. So just to speak this and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, your brother at the time of this recording has COVID. He's a doctor. He's in the hospital. I needed some healing work on him, and you're kind of asking, like, what can you do to help him?
Yeah.
Right. So I mean, just looking at this, obviously you have a lot of humility and a desire to be in service. You know, this Mercury, Venus, Jupiter, Pluto, stellium up there in the 10th house. There's a whole lot here around, you know, your work and your service and wanting to give yourself. So Venus is a ruler of your South Node in Libra. What is it that you do?
Currently I work as an interpreter and translator. Yeah. I've always done like healing things, but on the side,
Okay.
like Reiki or Access Consciousness.
Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. And I've done yoga for 30 years, some
Okay.
teaching. Yeah.
So let me tune in for a moment. So when we ask about how to heal another person or how to support another person, when there's a lot of love there, what's actually happening, what we're really asking for is, how can Creator, how can love use me to express the truth, right? To bring healing, and what is real healing, right? Like, healing of the body isn't what healing is actually about. That's a temporary thing, because the body's a temporary thing. And so real healing is actually of our own mind. Real healing is the return to who we are. You can get healed and then you can, you know, fall and trip and hurt yourself right afterwards. So the question always brings us back to our own relationship with the truth, and where we are seeking to affect an outcome, to do something for another. What's really of benefit, what's really of value, is the love that we are. Because our minds think his body should be healed, right? And so we've made a decision. We have an idea of what healing is. The truth is wellness, is peace, is unity, is contentment, is joy. But then there's this idea and this time construct around what it looks like and how it has to happen, or our own preference for what it looks like. So what comes to me to share with you, seeing all this Virgo in the 10th house and Pluto ruling your Neptune in the 12th, and your Neptune, you know, squares your Sun in Leo in the 10th, two things come through. It feels that there is within you a very strong drive to be in service, a very strong drive to be giving yourself to the world, doing work where you can be shining a higher vibration into the world. And you have Mars ruling that North Node also in the 9th house, trining that North Node, which is ruled by the Sun of the 10th. It's very much about going forward, expressing yourself, moving out into life as a self-actualized being. What arises here is your Sun, Neptune, resonates with becoming infused with the light, with the authority and the clarity of the light, and listening to that guidance and asking, what can I do? Not just for your brother, but it's more like asking for your mind, for your perceptions, for all constructs that keep you in seeing something as wrong. So it's like bringing yourself on track, bringing yourself into alignment with what's actually true about your brother, with what's actually true about everyone, what's true about yourself. I just had this intuitive sense, and I'm not sure if I'm translating it clearly yet. A lot of this connects with you bringing in this quality of faithfulness and devotion into your life. And oftentimes in the 12th house, we have to get out of the spiritual hiding closet. And that a lot of people are often waiting for us to get out of the closet, to stop hiding our spiritual gifts. And if you're keeping yourself small, not wanting to take up space, not wanting to freak people out with all the light, then it's almost like you're not letting God use you. So that's just a thought that arises of, where can you give yourself more permission to live in your joy, to live in your peace, to live in your unity. And the prayer for your brother, and I share this prayer with you, is let me become an instrument of healing and love. And then it's like, what a gift. I get to be this and direct awareness towards my holy healed brother. And then it's like, if you're meant to use your hand, if there's a thing, if there's an action that will guide you, you will know. Do you want to share it, speak to any of this?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm doing things that I've always done, but I'm allowing people maybe ask questions, and I'm allowing what comes speak what comes up.
Do you ever teach classes?
No, but now somebody asked me to teach this Access Consciousness class, and I think I'm gonna teach. But
yeah, good. I mean, I just feel that strongly for you, because it's like the more you let yourself be seen as the light, the more you'll find that your work, your life is less about doing, and it's more about being in alignment with what you are, and then you get to just reflect these teachings to others. And I think the more you're doing this work where you're getting to stand in your power, stand in your knowing, stand in your radiance, the more you'll find yourself experiencing and sharing healings, sharing these gifts with many others.
Yeah, I sometimes don't know how to go about it. I feel I can give. I feel like I feel I am more prepared. I even found someone that I love now recently.
I think it's a part of it is just letting yourself do it. And you get in front of class, and it's like, what am I doing? What's my purpose? And you do the preparation that you can, but I think at the end of the day, it's, you remember, you're not deciding what your purpose is. That's already decided for you. You're just letting yourself be used. So that reference, starting with prayer, I'm just sharing some thoughts and advice relative to that. I hope it's okay. Starting with prayer, starting from that place of, okay, I have this opportunity to teach. May this be healing for me. So one of the things in this whole Neptunian journey is there isn't separation. We're never healing someone else. We're never doing something for someone else. It's one journey. That's why we become that which we're giving.
Yeah.
So it's training ourselves to orient in that way. So this should be a joyful journey for you.
Great.
Thank you for sharing, Adriana.
Thank you so much, Ari. Yeah.
Okay, Della Luna.
Hey, Ari.
Hi.
So, I have 12th house sun and Mercury, but they're out of sign. Like Mercury's in Cancer, and then the sun's in Leo. And so I heard you say, like, when you had Leo in the 12th, like working on being seen. So I was curious, what is Cancer in the 12th? And then I'm kind of wondering, like, having Cancer, like, ruling a sun, right, in Leo, like a fire, and then having water there. Yeah. That's my question.
Great. So it's just an example where you have Cancer on the 12th house cusp. So Cancer rules the 12th house, but first and foremost, that Leo sun is still Leo in the 12th house. It's just not the ruler of the 12th. So Cancer conditions the entirety of the 12th house. We know the sun rules your north node, and that's really important. So that 12th house energy is significant for you. It's super important. Your moon in Pisces is the ruler of that Cancer in the 8th house. So it's really repeating that same theme. Let me just tune into what else is there with it. I love it for you. It's that moon in Pisces is ruled by Neptune in the 5th, back to that Leo in the 12th energy. Neptune in the 5th being similar to Leo in the 12th. So it's sort of a cyclic and repetitive theme here. I'm going to tune in for a moment. What I would start with, and what comes to my mind is just the nature of your own empathy and your attunement to other people's thoughts, to what other people are feeling, what other people are needing. And the challenge with, of course, Mercury and Cancer in the 12th can be that sense of being in a state of vigilance around being, especially squaring Mars, Pluto in the 3rd, around, what are other people's energetic dynamics, and then the mind not being able to rest because there's a lot of energy going outside. And so this would speak, especially with the moon ruling that, this would speak to the learning of Mercury being information and context and that which we're learning about, and how we're communicating, how we're intellectually organizing and making our thoughts connected one to another. It's learning about who am I. It's like there's a tension here that becomes inquisitive, like, who am I? Like, where do I belong? Right? And to actually look at the thoughts and the nature of what you're studying, what you're learning, and to not settle on something that provides a false sense of meaning. So to me, this strongly resonates, especially with the square to Pluto. This strongly resonates with going deeper and deeper and deeper into the truth of who you are, and learning to think thoughts and build logical constructs that relate to the oneness, that relate to the wholeness, instead of perpetuating a sense of separation. So like as a counselor, as a guide, this would be an incredibly empathic dynamic for you. Just really being able to feel what's happening in other people, sensing that, having a deep attunement, and even dreaming and getting a lot of messages, and this deep sense of unconditional love and care for all beings. And it's ultimately letting your mind be shaped and be guided and used according to how it wants to be used. And thus your sense of security, who am I, where am I, where do I belong, where am I safe? It's not something you need to logically figure out with something of this world. By giving, by sharing, by using it according to a greater purpose, there's meaning that's found. I'm maybe going a little bit too into interpretation. I'm not sure if you're asking for that. But anyway, do you want to share anything on this, or?
I would just say, like a lot of what you said, I would say is accurate. For one, that feeling of being connected to everyone's thoughts. That's the I kind of feel it as like overwhelmed, basically, not necessarily as like a tool or something, a skill. It's kind of like like that.
Right. Thank you.
So yeah, and then same with the Pisces moon, and all of it together. I've never been able to like hold all of it together. So thank you for speaking on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And may I offer a piece on the overwhelm?
Sure.
So yeah, Mercury, nervous system, overwhelm, Pisces, water, energy. It's like all this attunement. And so this is where the particular practice of moving away from the overwhelm, like the overwhelm is because the mind's getting lost in the ocean of everything else around you. And so it's moving away from that into an internal place of peace and a reference for peace that will determine where to direct your mind and your energy, instead of it being constantly, because a part of the issue with the 12th house in general is everything in the world. We can have this experience where it's like we're constantly being shaped and guided and molded by everything in the world. It's moving us, and thus a feeling of deep vulnerability, not knowing our power, or feeling very vulnerable, or feeling like an open sponge for anything. And the answer to that isn't the traditional like boundaries necessarily. It's learning that, kind of like the immune system, when the immune system is really strong and we're vibrating it really clearly, other things can't get in. And so the practice here would be in your own service, in your own work, in your own mind cultivation, whatever that is for you. It's like the work that you're here to do, the ways in which you're here to use your mind, you letting yourself become more and more of an instrument for that. And kind of, when again, with that sun ruling that North Node Leo, it's very much like trusting yourself, trusting that you have a purpose, and that purpose wants to animate you. It's just kind of asking you to start first house, to move it. And then all that Piscean Cancer stuff, I feel, is like where you can communicate in ways that can speak to the masses. Mercury in the 12th house are words that are universal, and you don't know who they're meant to touch. You don't know who they're meant to serve. So I would just offer that there's a refinement process in allowing yourself to become more and more of an instrument. And that shifts from the overwhelm into being in a vibration of service and healing and sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Okay. So we'll end with this question: who am I? I don't know. That's the question. Like the answer to the question, who am I, is not something you can locate or find or grab with a particular, like, this is the answer, right? Like, think Cancer in the 12th house, for example. Cancer is identity, sense of self. So who am I? Like, you're everything and no one. Like, we can't do that. That existential question, like that deeper thought of like, who am I? It doesn't actually bring us to any kind of resolution. It actually takes us beyond the idea of the questioner into the context of the question itself, into the context of where we are right now. It's like the context of reality that's now. It's like, and that's where I think a lot of the teachers that talk about who am I practices, a lot of what I hear about this is it's about going beyond seeking another thing to hold on to. Like, oh, I figured it out. I'm never going to be vulnerable again. I figured out who I am. And you don't figure out. There's a teaching from Nisargadatta Maharaj. It's like, when I look inside, I find no one. And when I look outside of myself, I see myself as everyone. And in between the two, do I dance? Something like that. And I think we don't really come up with another identity answer for that who am I question. H says, some similarity to Della. My name is Hannah, Jupiter in Gemini, and Sun and Mercury Kazimi in Cancer, both in the 12th. Moon and Neptune and Saturn in the 5th. Cool. Yeah. Okay. Adriana, you should just look up the quote. I'm quoting him wrong. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Thank you for joining me in this very 12th house class on the 12th house. Yeah. I'll see you all in the next one.
Great. Thank you so much, Ari Moshe. That was fantastic. Would you all please thank Ari Moshe Wolfe, everyone?
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's brilliant.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful.